So yeah, today I want to talk about how to talk about money without fighting about money. And I also want to be crystal clear and super transparent. You can see so much space above my head on this phone. That's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Oh, maybe I can zoom it. Here, let's zoom. Oh, too much. Okay, there we go. So I just want to be like super transparent in saying that I have not always been super, super skilled at this. All right. I love who I see watching live on YouTube. I've not been super transparent about my own issues with talking about money and fighting about money. I haven't always been very skilled at this, and I'm fully well aware of that. But I think that the best thing that we can do is continually try to do better, to learn and improve. And that's all about personal growth and development, right? And so much about money fights actually has absolutely nothing to do with money. So let's dive right into it. I have just a few simple steps. I don't want this to be too long today, but a few simple steps that you can take in order to have these conversations in a way that feels really productive. The first thing is I want you to set an intention. Why do you need to have a money conversation to begin with? Is it, you're dealing with, some spending that's going on somewhere else that you feel like you need to address, or maybe you're feeling like, boy, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to retire if we don't change, or maybe you've got someone who you need to financially support or stop financially supporting, and you need to have some conversations. The first thing I want you to do is set your intention with yourself. What is it that I want to get out of this conversation? Am I looking to inspire someone to do different things, or am I looking to seek understanding? Maybe you need to understand a little bit more about what's going on for somebody else, why they're behaving the way that they're behaving with money. Or maybe you need to ask somebody for help. Maybe you're the one that is needing for somebody else to kind of come alongside of you and help to either get you or you together collectively as a couple or a family, get you to a different place. But just be really clear and set your intention before you even have the conversation, because that way you can keep that intention in mind the whole time you're having that conversation. Okay, the next thing is I want you to predict the obstacles. This is something that is really also instrumental when you are trying to change behaviors. Let's say that you have a weight loss goal, or you want to work out more or spend less, or whatever the case may be. A lot of times we know that we are going to run into obstacles. So think in advance, what are the obstacles that I might be up against, and how can I proactively avoid them or address them, right? If you know that you drive past your favorite coffee shop every day and you end up stopping, then maybe you start taking a new route, right? So it's the same thing. If you know that you're going to have a money conversation with somebody and you already know typically how they respond when you're having money conversations, you already know that. So now you can prepare for that. And this is where you're coming back to your intention. So if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and they, get all bent out of shape and they just say like, why is everything just like all about money to you? You know that they're going to say something like that. So you can kind of slow down and be able to think through, what have I prepared for this? Because I already knew that this was coming. And if you know that you can say, that's an interesting question. This is one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten, and I also love to give. And it is, instead of getting defensive, get curious. So you can say, that's a really interesting perspective that you think this conversation means that to me, everything is all about money. Can you tell me why this lands with you? Because, chances are you're trying to address a specific topic or a specific behavior or a specific incident. And if they feel like everything you always talk about is just all about money, well, that, I mean, number one, that's sort of like an everything statement, right? But instead of just saying like, I hate it when you say that, instead just kind of like slow down and just say, can you say more about that? Why is it that you feel that everything that I do is just about money? And then listen. You have to really actively listen to what their points are. And I will tell you that sometimes I get into conversations with my teenager, and if she's saying something that is, kind of in this like, real like escalated state, even if it's not necessarily like about me in particular, but it's just about a situation, I will just kind of stop and I'm watching my tone, right? I'm trying to influence her level of, of excitement with my own calming things down. And I'll say, do you want to hear my thoughts around that? Because she's perfectly allowed to say no, and that's okay. That's okay. So anyhow, I want you to like just prepare for what you think the obstacles are going to be. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Understanding what somebody else's perspective is, even if it's their perspective of you or their perspective of the situation, it will help you to kind of frame that conversation moving forward. For the most part, we all probably are very well intentioned with each other, right? We probably don't go into things with our loved ones trying to start a fight or pick a fight or whatever, even if they think we're trying to pick a fight. So you really just want to make sure that you're level setting and just saying, I just want us to talk about this. I just want us to understand. And if your intention for the conversation is to inspire, I will just say that like, as a money person, sometimes like your spreadsheets are not super inspiring to others, right? You have to maybe kind of take it a step back and ask questions like, tell me, what do you dream about for our future? Like, where do you see us in 20 years? Like, what do we think we'll do with ourselves when the kids are gone, right? So if you're looking to inspire somebody, start again by asking them some questions, and just getting their take on things. It can really just open up the whole conversation. And I'm going to also say too that if the conversation warrants it, and you know that it's one of those things where maybe you've been financially supporting somebody for too long, or in a way that you can't do anymore, or that doesn't feel good, and you're trying, it's hard because a lot of people are helpers, right? But if you're trying to kind of get back to like your own values and preservation of your own financial success, you may want to also have in mind your boundaries before you start that conversation. So really just being able to say, I understand, your position, and here's my position. And I just need to be clear that this is something I can't do any longer, right? Just making sure that you know your boundaries and get clear with yourself about your boundaries before you jump in to the conversation as well. Okay. And then the last thing that I want to say, I've actually pulled this from a podcast that I listen to sometimes. And I really just kind of love the simplicity of it, because to me, it says everything: timing, tone, and turf. Whenever you want to have a conversation that is, vulnerable or sensitive, or you're kind of worried about how it might go, I'm seeing this comment. You mean we're not all math nerds? No, we're not all math nerds. That's funny though, right? But so yes, timing, tone, and turf is really just making sure, some of them are obvious, right? Tone, how many of us, if there was a mirror or a recording of what we looked like when we were having conversations, we might see that there's some tone that maybe we didn't recognize. I think that is a huge part of self-awareness. And like, I understand that I can be very animated when I talk. It doesn't always mean that I'm fired up about something, but I do understand that I can get these looks and my voice can go like this, but it doesn't mean that I'm upset about something. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm in the moment. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. But making sure that your tone is in check. Like, you have to be self-aware enough to make sure that you come with the right tone in your delivery. And then timing is like, don't wait to have these discussions at the end of a work day when you've both had a long day. Or if there's been, some event that's just happened and tensions are high, that's not the time, right? Make sure that I think it's good to actually preface this and say, you know what? I would love for us to have a conversation about, some things. I'm thinking of an example of someone who I know that their former spouse, suddenly developed like quite a shopping habit, and that became a source of contention. And so if you know that you need to have a conversation about that, I think that you can say, hey, there's some things that have been happening lately, that I feel like we need to talk about. And you don't have to be super vague so that they're left wondering what it is. But if you can just say, Amazon came by again today, like wondering if maybe you and I can like sit down and have a chat about that. Now, that in and of itself is a pretty benign statement, but I'm sure that that will allow the other person to kind of like have some sort of a response. And I think that if you schedule it and say, we don't need to talk about this right now, but maybe can we get together Saturday morning and like go for a walk and like have some coffee and we'll talk about it then. I have some questions and I just want to hear your perspective. Right? I have some questions and I just want to hear your perspective. It's not, what have you been doing? Why are you spending so much money? Right? The tone thing. So just making sure that you understand how you come to that conversation. And then the turf part is literally like making sure that you're on neutral ground, because we all have very, very different, lives and situations. Sometimes a space can be a more dominant space for one person or another, right? Like if your quiet place to go talk, like when the kids aren't around, is like the man cave in the basement, and we all know that like that's his space, then sometimes that can actually set a tone just that like, oh, we're in your space, right? And so I think making a neutral space is also really good. This is something too that I thought about recently. Not thought about recently, but I've had this come up in conversation, is that when you have an opportunity to talk on a walk or in the car, those are times when you don't have to sit face to face. And that can be really helpful. When you're in a car and you're both just looking forward, you're just one person's driving, the other person hopefully isn't just staring right over and barking. But when you're both just looking forward, it kind of like breaks the tension a little bit. It breaks the tension. You have to kind of rely on listening a little bit more for the pauses and the breaks. And same thing with walking outside. Number one, it's a neutral environment. Number two, you're just kind of walking side by side. If you decide that you want to stop and look at each other or sit down and like really get into something, that can also just kind of de-escalate a situation, by having these periods where we're, number one, movement, I think is actually really good for talking, is when you're moving as well. Because I think there's some stuff with like the brain, having to like do multiple things at the same time that, and not a scientific theory at all, but I've gone on enough walks and talks that I do think that is pretty helpful. And I've had a lot of conversations while walking that maybe could have been tense, but they just weren't, because it just felt like more of a kind of like, this is us in an alone time kind of connecting. And, let's just talk about stuff. So anyway, I hope that these are helpful tips for you. So if you, want to hear more about, how to have conversations around money, it is something that I actually dive really deep into in my one-on-one coaching. So I actually have a new group coaching program. It's going to be 6 weeks, and that's launching in the middle of December. So so it's going to be a group coaching. You'll still have some one-on-one with me, but it's going to be 6 weeks. And I'm not waiting until January 1st to get, ahead of any of these financial goals, or we're not going to wait for the credit card to come and look back at our December spending. We're going to start addressing things now. So if you are interested in that, I would love for you to just drop me a comment wherever you're watching this. Just leave me a comment that says tell me more. And I would be happy to respond and let you know more about the program when everything is launching and the doors are open and all that too. So anyway, all right. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Thanks for listening. Hope this has been helpful. And I will talk to y'all again soon. All right. Bye.